Hello, everyone. Hey, thanks for joining me today. So, I'm Daniel with American Jobs Factory, where we want to create jobs that don't destroy us for the future. And I have a great guest today that I'm really excited about talking to. I met on the campaign trail, Dr. Jett, and he has a lot of insight into nonprofits, but I'm going to pick his brain about organizations today because he knows a lot about that too, just how to organize people. And, that's kind of what American Jobs Factory is all about. When we do create jobs, it's really about the system and putting people together. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Jett now. And so I'm excited. Here we go. Hello, Dr. Jett.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Well, I'm excited to have you here. And, just to start off, let's give people a little background, who you are, what kind of things that you do. So if you can tell everyone, who are you?
Okay. See, Quintus Jett. I'm originally from California. I've always had an interest in organizations and strategy, and I was fortunate enough to get a Ph.D. in it. So I have a Ph.D. in organizations and strategy from the School of Engineering at Stanford University. And in the past 20 years, I've been a management professor in various places. So the business school at Rice University in Texas, professor of engineering management at Dartmouth College at its engineering school, and also a professor of public administration at Rutgers University, Newark.
Okay, awesome.
So I think, and so maybe as a specialty within strategy, I began with the study of high tech companies.
Okay.
And they have to have strategies, and where there's lots of competition and innovation. But now, for the past, I'd say probably 10 years, I think I've been more focused on issues of voluntarism, mission-based, purpose-driven organizations. And so right now, I probably call myself more like a strategist for public causes.
Okay, awesome. So what was your take when the Yang Gang got together about how the organization really had some grassroots kind of people coming out of the woodwork that followed the vision, but we were very not organized, I guess, or traditional either. So I mean, what was your kind of take of the organicness of it all?
Well, I mean, in some ways, is very typical of actually a lot of large campaigns, in that when you have a figure such as Andrew Yang, who is very inspiring to people, and especially if that individual has not much previous record in things,
Right.
and doesn't really have the organization to begin with, what kind of happened with the Yang Gang is actually very typical.
Oh, okay.
Which is that there's all this energy and people want to come up and participate, and
Right.
so the campaign has to learn to rely on people who they don't really have very much control over.
Right. Well, yeah, and I felt like the kind of the failures of the campaign did fall along the lines of a new organization that didn't know how to corral people and put them into productive places that really captured that energy. Did you kind of feel the same way?
Well, yeah, in some ways, I mean, I viewed it more as a strategy problem.
Okay.
Because I was involved in a number of things within the gang world. I was I was on the moderation team for the base camp.
Okay.
Every week I would spend time with. There was like a weekly call for the grassroots leader. I was a part of that. Like it's sort of, and then I was later president of one of the super PACs, grass-oriented super PACs called the Funds for America. But you could see from the very beginning. I mean,
weren't you even involved with Truckers for Yang to some extent?
Actually, yeah. Fred and Sola. So I knew them, and right. and all that. And so I think the Yang campaign really was a strategy problem. First, the campaign wasn't really good for asking for money. Like if you were going like a year before, in the very beginning, I remember asking, you guys need to raise money. And it's like, well, no, we can't ask Yang Gang for money because people get mad. It's like, well, we better get over that. Start asking for money. But then even beyond that, I mean, you could see from the calendar of the primaries what was going to happen. You know, that Iowa was going to happen, and within 5 weeks there'd be like 40% or more of the delegates would be decided. So pretty much by mid-March,
it was all over.
It was going to be over, and you could see that in the previous summer. And I used to mention that every summer. It's like, hey, you know, April, that's too late. It's really too late.
Well, and I did find it strange. Like, I was in Iowa doing the caucus thing, you know, for the campaign, and it was fascinating that everybody who showed up basically already had their candidate in mind. There wasn't really swaying people unless their candidate fell out, you know. But I was like, I was thinking you could easily set up like a Facebook group and say, are you on the Yang campaign and are you coming? You know, if you threw a big party like the weekend before, you would know how many people in your district are coming, like in your neighborhood. And it feels like you could get them all there. Like, oh, you're going to show up next weekend for this thing, right? You know, but it was like, oh, it's kind of a surprise, like who was going to show up and who wasn't. I felt like it could be like really pre-planned if you had that organization going.
Yeah, I think part of the key, and this is where I think the part of me that's the strategist. I mean, so much of strategy is recognizing the environment and your purpose and the constraints, like a competition, timing. You know, so that would be like I think Andrew Yang had a bus tour in December, like to go to different parts of Iowa, and I look at that and think, whoa, if only we could have done that in the summer.
Right. Yeah, I definitely heard that as far as the bus tour. It was a little too late. It was great, but it was a little too late. So are there any nonprofits that you're involved in right now that you like to talk about or explain what they're doing?
See, two that are the most fresh. So one is called the GEM Project. It's based out of in Newark, New Jersey, and I just joined its board.
Okay.
And so it was founded by a Rutgers alum, a young Rutgers alum who basically set up a way to organize young, high school students and early college students and have them almost like learn and develop through activism.
Okay.
And the other thing I'm interested in, or I am involved in, or at least engaged in, public causes and political causes.
Oh, okay. Public and political causes. Well, definitely, I, you know, just that Yang could turn his campaign into a down ballot candidate campaign and just progressive policy movement after his campaign, I thought was pretty brilliant. I don't know of too many campaigns that, I mean, maybe I'm just not aware, but too many campaigns that turn that energy into something positive after the campaign ends, you know?
Yeah, that's actually pretty. Well, yeah, then there's a lot. Depends. Like right now, depends on what happens with the election, like that's about to happen.
Right.
I think I very much, for a while, I've sort of seen what's coming as a change election.
Right.
That's not just a blue wave. I think it's almost like a wave of something that's much larger than that. So one race that I'm very intrigued by is Ricky Dale Harrison, who's the Libertarian candidate for the U.S. Senate in Arkansas. What's interesting about that race to me are the constraints. So that's Tom Cotton's seat.
Okay.
Cotton. So Tom Cotton's running for that. And through I'm not sure how this happened, but the Democrats are not running anyone against Tom Cotton. So the only people on the ballot for that seat are Tom Cotton and Ricky Dale Harrison. Those are the two, the Libertarian. And so I think that's interesting. I think that's very interesting, right? Because the impression I seem to get is there are a lot of people who don't like Tom Cotton. I mean, not just Democrats, but other people, they just don't like Tom Cotton. So you could actually do a lot of momentum by just simply being that, hey, I'm not Tom Cotton.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think the Republicans have a tough hill to climb this election, just the way the economy is. I mean, whoever's in power, it kind of feels like, hey, we need to change if a global pandemic hits and, you know, people aren't protected. But, you know, it's all, the future is always a surprise. So, you never can. But was there, again, so you talked about it was the GEM, what's it called
The
again?
GEM project,
The GEM
GEM.
project.
Yeah, it's GEM
Okay.
project.
And
And
is there another one you wanted to talk about too, you said?
yeah, I think actually I think Ricky's campaign, because I do think that there's we're in an environment where things are changing so suddenly with the
Right.
pandemic and all that I don't think it's about particular issues. It really is like, who is the person and what do they stand for? In that sense, even their biography seems to matter. And so it's almost like not just the message, but the messenger really matters. I think that we saw that with Andrew Yang's appeal. And so it's kind of like, at some point, I'm using this as an example, just because there are a lot of people don't like Tom Cotton, aren't satisfied with him, isn't enough. Well, who is Ricky Harrison, right?
Right.
But then all of a sudden, the fact, okay, he's African American, huh? And he's a libertarian, which means he's not black. He's libertarian, but he's not Republican.
Right. Okay.
There's that appeal. And it turns out his biggest issue is criminal justice reform, because he's been involved in chaplain. He's been involved as a chaplain in ministry within prisons.
Oh, okay.
And he's also done missionary work in China too. And his wife is on active duty in the Navy. And so he's raising his 3 kids. And I think 2 of his kids are on the spectrum. So it's like, okay, when you take that picture, it's like, who you are in this environment, what goal we have, our sense of purpose, and what we bring as individuals to that purpose really has a lot more momentum than it normally would.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see who wins. I am looking kind of closely at San Francisco. A guy named Shahid Buttar is running against Nancy Pelosi as a progressive. And, it would be great if somebody else won that seat. I mean, it would be a big upset for the Democratic Party. But I don't, it's hard to tell in these polls, who has the momentum and who doesn't, because I mean, Nancy Pelosi is just basically, not giving him any attention is her strategy, and, directing the press to do the same thing. So but the momentum that I think he has is like just knocking on doors and getting out in the community. So the community knows him better than the media is letting on. So, but he's not particularly Yang Gang, and that's what's exciting. Is there's a lot of Yang Gang. I think like David Kim in California is running. I think his election's today or something is what I saw.
Oh yeah, in Los Angeles, there's a lot of great momentum, and you got a lot of great early organization. I always pronounce Hannah's last name wrong, but yeah, David's had some people from the Yang Gang involved, like even early on, to help create the infrastructure that he has to be able to execute on this campaign.
Yeah, I wanted to. I mean, for this channel, I'm definitely trying to concentrate on nonprofits, but it's hard not to talk about Yang Gang stuff because, it's still. I mean, it's still so interesting to me. What Andrew created and what will, lots of connections in the Yang Gang, and just what we're still trying to accomplish, just like a change in America right now. But.
I think the way we could transition, or at least like in the end of the day, for me, someone like me, in certain ways, all of it's the same. Like, in other words, it's almost like
your nonprofit is correlating towards being activists in communities, right? For these organizations,
or it's more like these are all social enterprises in the end,
right?
So it's like, there's more than going on than just simply making money. There's actually a purpose in terms of people, the planet, but it's still possible. But in order to do that as an organization, you still have to pay attention to money and how you invest your resources in terms of the risk involved.
Well, and that's one of the things that, lots of stuff attracted me to Andrew's campaign, but his idea of human-centered capitalism, And, with all the talk about, socialism is bad, capitalism is good, or vice versa. Capitalism's bad, socialism is good in certain respects. I thought just changing the rules of, like any organization does well, depending on this incentives. And that's kind of what Andrew talked about, changing the incentives to something more positive.
Yes, yes. And so in that sense, I mean, that's where my head is most of the time. Like, how do you address these issues of strategy, organization, and execution when we sort of accept that it's not simply about how much money you're making? Because even for a business, it's not that simple. I mean, it's not that reductionist, even for a business, just simply, oh, I'm just making money. It's like, no, there's usually something else going on, especially if you're a business that has longevity. Usually there's something that you stand for. There's something that you stand. Even a company like, I know people won't believe it when I say it, but Walmart. Walmart really stands for something. If you actually go to Bentonville, Arkansas, and as you hear about it, it's like Sam Walton. I mean, Walmart is the company that specializes in delivering low-cost things to populations of people who need to stretch their dollar.
Yeah.
People who need to stretch their dollar when times are good, and when times are bad, they don't have much money and they need to stretch that dollar. And Walmart as an organization, that is what they do. And they are actually very good at it. And sometimes they are so good at it that they end up compromising in other ways. Like they make moral compromises that aren't good because they're really almost equipped to do this main purpose.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think the organization was better with Sam Walton. And I don't know the second generation of Walmart stays with that, culture of doing good as well as when, Sam Walton was around, I would say.
And to tie this back to the politics too. Andrew Yang has a podcast, right? And so
Right.
There's one he did with David Axelrod, who was advisor for Obama. And
Sure.
So I like to encourage everyone to look that up and go to minute 50, where they talk about like what's happening in our country. But basically what's about to happen is that we are going to be revisiting what is this country about in some very fundamental ways within the next 2-3 months. I mean, and so in other words, the big thing right now is Biden winning and defeating Trump and Trumpism and all that corruption like exposed. But after that, we have a very big challenge ahead of us. And that is almost like to relaunch America. Like, how do we make America that beautiful thing that we always say that we are, but we really weren't? This is our chance to actually do it for real. Yeah. And so, I mean, but that's visionary stuff. That's about a vision and identity.
Well, my solution or my take on it is that we need more organizations that put people first before profits. And we have, I mean, capitalism is a great avenue for freedom, definitely, because, I mean, I've actually been listening to a lot of, critiques against capitalism lately. But a lot of stuff that they state, still, people can start any kind of organization pretty much that they want to handle any problem, in America. And, if you want a co-op or you want a specific problem taken care of, you have the freedom in America to start that organization and focus on that. I don't know that that's true in many other countries. I think that's what does make, our type of capitalism effective, ultimately. And so it's all about going in that avenue where we are concentrating on problems over profit, more than we maybe are right now.
Well, no, it's almost like, I mean, I won't pretend to be like a deep scholar of Adam Smith of capitalism, but some of what I read, it's not quite as evil, like in what it's intending to do and the problems it's solving as it's made out to be. And so I think that seems to be the problem, that whenever we create something some political idea that once it enters the realm of politics, it could be capitalism, it could be actually faith institutions, communism. Once you get people involved in it, the original idea starts getting corrupted, actually sometimes fairly quickly.
So what role do you think nonprofits have to create jobs, for the future and to heal America as far as this coronavirus, catastrophe that we've been under for the last several months?
I think they play a role in just helping us to see that, that they're a mechanism, because too often a lot of our dialogue is shaped in two places. Either the government's going to do it or private enterprise is going to do it.
Right.
And really, it's like what we've seen in the past, like maybe especially the past, I'd say 40 years, is that this issue of the nonprofit, and not just the nonprofit, the charitable nonprofit that, with the tax exemption, but just simply the social enterprise, or at least like the social entrepreneur, the social innovator, the ability to, use the skills, the nimbleness of almost market thinking, right, and execution, but you're in strategy, but you're applying it towards helping people. An example I can give is I have this became very real for me about 14 years ago, around this time. It was about a year after Katrina happened, Hurricane Katrina. New Orleans was devastated, and I created a project to sort of help. Okay. And what was on my mind was this, just to quickly summarize it, whenever there's a catastrophe of some kind, basically two kinds of forces are at work. A big catastrophe, it's so big, we all want to help, right? It's like, oh, gosh, we want to help. But the other side is the opposite, where it's like, this is so big, I don't know, I am paralyzed, right?
Right.
And so I came up with a project that basically we picked an area in New Orleans, a district, and we mapped it house to house, address to address, red, yellow, blue, green. Like red was devastated, yellow means gutted, blue means renovated or occupied, green means vacant lot. And we used it almost as a triage so that, you could do that and then basically able to look and see what is needed where.
Right.
But then you could figure out where people can allocate themselves. Like if you're a business owner or you're a resident, it's like, can I come back? Well, look, this is what's going on in the neighborhood. Like, so providing information to facilitate independent and collective action. So, nothing about what I really described is really, I have to deal with money because I had to figure out, like, sometimes I had to go off of my credit card. And sometimes I remember different points, I was able to get money from my university, the college, Dartmouth College. But, okay. But it wasn't about me making a profit.
Right.
But I was using the same kinds of skills that you would use in business. But the idea is almost like using the skills of business and innovation for charitable and humanitarian and compassionate ends.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of Americans that have that focus. Yeah. And it's not just, millionaires and billionaires creating a tax write-off organization that they can use, but there's also, lots of people that are starting organizations to take care of a problem and not making any money through it until maybe the problem's resolved or it picks up and gets more momentum.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that, I was doing that project in New Orleans over a period of 2 to 3 years. And so if any of you out there were like among the people who went to New Orleans wanting to help, it's like, I know you. I know you because there have been hundreds of you who worked on my project, and it was all kinds of people, every race, every different ages, different people, different political backgrounds. Like, there is something in this American thing that, yes, we have some people that are deplorable and hateful, but a lot of us want to help. And even some of the people, actually, there are even some people who are very hateful in one arena in America, like they're hateful,
right?
Group. In other arenas, these same people are actually very charitable to different other kinds of people,
right?
But it's like, how do we do that? How do we go beyond just ourselves? I mean, because a lot of us, yes, there are people who just care about themselves, but there are a lot of us, I think most people, there are elements of wanting to care about someone else, not just themselves, even if that means, okay, it's this because it's my friend. This is my son, my daughter, my mother, my family member. This is my old friend, This person looks like me. Or this one has a similar background as I do.
Right. Well, I think too, if there is good organization, good command structure, people are better able to get involved because when you get into our organization, you realize nobody knows what they're doing, it's chaotic, or you don't have clear directives, then people get disgruntled and they start doing wonky things and are all over the place. But when you get into our organization that has good leadership and you know exactly where you fit, then the best of you can come out.
Yeah, I think that was probably the one lesson that I think I wish I could have done more within the Yang world, because the issue is that we always need structure.
Right.
Good organic structure. You don't need command and control structure. In fact, when things are uncertain, very much a lot of hierarchy and command and control, like army style, could actually get in the way. Mm-hmm. But you do need to have vision. You need to have clear roles and communication and trust. And if you have that, it's you can do a lot. So an example I often use is 9/11 in New York.
Okay.
Manhattan's an island, so all of a sudden the towers are falling and people can't get off of Manhattan to New Jersey or back home. Basically, there was a spontaneous boat lift that happened. A bunch of people who had their own boats are like, hey, there are people trying to get off of Manhattan. I think I want to go help them. And they just go and they started doing it. And then pretty soon all these boats are doing it. And then the US Coast Guard see what's happening and says, okay, let's, they acted as almost like a traffic controller of who goes in. And so within the day, over 500,000 people were boat lifted off of Manhattan. And there was never a plan for this. There was no plan. No, there was no plan. Even if they knew that this was going to happen, this could happen, there was no plan. They just made it up.
Right.
And it was successful. And so I think that's what's interesting, is that our ability in today's society with social media and other things to create emergent structures.
Right.
So
that sounded very much like the Yang Gang. There's no plan, but we're going to get involved and start, this YouTube thing or Yang Day or whatever it takes. We're going to just, get on the freeway or whatever it takes. So it is pretty awesome to see in those circumstances what can transpire when everybody's motivated and wants to get together in a common cause, for sure. Mm-hmm. So was there another, we never got to the other nonprofit you wanted to talk about, I don't think.
Actually, well, that was the Harrison campaign in the Senate campaign in Arkansas. That was like a political example of something that's kind of been on my mind.
Okay.
Those two.
Okay, sounds good. So do you have any general advice for, I guess, nonprofits to what they can do to be more successful and fundraise and get momentum just for our nonprofit people out there?
I was about to make a joke. It says, yes, fundraise, do that.
Yeah, fundraise.
But I think probably the one thing that because
let me stop you. When you say fundraise, is that just calling everyone you can every day and telling them about your organization, going through a sales kind of process and networking, or is it producing commercials or doing whatever you can? What kind of?
It's mechanic? Really well. At the end, it's all about having a mission.
Okay.
That you can speak to personally as a story. So example to flesh this out. So I was president of Abundance for America. So it's a super PAC. And so we needed to raise money. And so one of the ways in which we started was going through our own Rolodex.
Mm-hmm.
Here it was, it's like, and we were working with my Rolodex and basically like my phone contacts, and they're all loaded up into the dialer. And the way I got trained was basically like, okay, here's a script. And then it's like, boom. And then it just picked the number from my Rolodex. And the thing is,
that's scary.
Yeah, it was. And the person, I hope, if she's seeing this, she's hearing the full story. But at first, I didn't remember who it was. I saw the name, but I'm like, who is this? And I'm like, so it's ringing and it's ringing. I'm like, oh my gosh. But then it was like, picked up the phone. It was like, then I remembered who it was. Hey, how are you doing? And basically what, it wasn't about the script. It was like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, Quintus. And I say, what's up? I haven't spoke with you in a while. That's right. This is what's going on. Well, why am I calling you? Well, I'm working with this like organization called Abundance for America,
Okay.
and so then it's like telling my story about like why I'm engaged and why this organization might have more like broader relevance to the person I'm talking to. So that's really what fundraising is. I mean, in a way, and it's the same kind of thing the same kinds of things that you do to raise money is what you're doing to raise volunteers. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Give the why of what you're doing, and then give the specifics of what you need for the next step. It's like, hey, can you give us $10 or $20 or $100 to do X? Or can you volunteer 2 hours of your time to door knock?
So maybe that's an important piece of it is have an ask or have a objective of what you're going to be doing, what you're going to be using the money for that ask, and just continue to reach out to your network.
Yes, and the thing is, I think it's important to acknowledge that you may not have that. So it's important to have the sense of why you're doing what you're doing, like personally. But sometimes it takes a while to figure out what that objective is. It's like I knew when I went to after Katrina that I wanted to apply this sort of crowdsourcing mentality to help people. I knew that. But what did that specifically mean? It was probably about 6 months before it started to become something that was more actionable. It's like, the red, yellow, blue, green designation came from talking to a business owner in New Orleans who was referred to me by someone else I had talked to. But then even after the red, blue, green, it was only like over a year after Katrina that I finally said, okay, I want to do red, yellow, and blue and green. I'm doing this whole area of Gentilly that's so big, but I want to focus on one neighborhood, and I want to do that well. And that neighborhood's going to be Pontchartrain Park. And so it took that and acknowledging the constraints that you have to own the constraints that you're under. When I mapped Pontchartrain Park about 14 years ago, like the way it happened, it was the worst time of my life. It was the worst time of my life. My visiting appointment at Dartmouth had expired, and I had an interim appointment, so I was like half time.
Okay.
My wife and I just split up. So on paper, this is not the time to do some broad vision thing. But in other ways, it was the good time because then it allowed me to get serious. It's like, okay, what is the next concrete objective that this project needs? This project needs to go to Gentilly and pick one neighborhood, and I'll do it when I can, which is like those 2 weeks in December. And I'm just going to knock that out. I want to do that. And I want to ask people and invite people to come with me to do it and get their help. And as it turns out, once I got there, the same neighborhood that I had planned to do in 2.5 weeks, it got done in 4.5 days.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So are you the kind of person that can really identify a problem to solve pretty quickly? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think for other people, the way it plays out is if you're a social entrepreneur or innovator, I could speak with you and figure out what you need to do next.
Okay.
Whatever stage that you're at, there's always a next.
Right.
And so that's and the thing is, it's different for each, for each organization, entrepreneur, what their next stage is.
Yeah. So then I guess I'll transition to you giving American Jobs Factory advice, because that was the next kind of question development here. Obviously, with losing tons of jobs, I was kind of on this path, before I joined the gang, to want to create jobs, not knowing, we would have to go through a global pandemic that, I think we're like at 60 million jobs, maybe 50. I know we're getting better. We're rehiring, but we're still having job loss at this point. So, and I feel like before we start, hiring all these people, we definitely need organizations that are putting people in mind and not just plugging them in to whatever. The idea of this organization is to separate basically the profit structure from the organization of humans, human structure. So like the nonprofit aspect of it is all like human resources, getting out the paychecks, making sure people are taken care of in an organization. Everything to deal with people would be on a nonprofit side. And then the profit side would be still, businesses looking to solve, innovation problems or create, value. But their people, they don't really have to worry about, except for they still have cultural things. That's always going to be something any organization has to deal with. But if there's an issue, it's kind of like they can put it towards the nonprofit company that kind of deals with that. I've been involved in many organizations, and they always talk about culture, but it seems very ingenuous, because a lot of times they prove throughout the working with you that they don't really care about you. You're just about the profit. If you're not making your numbers or something like that, a lot of times they don't have a structure to help you or help you get better. They're just like, okay, well, we need to make our numbers, so you don't fit into that. Sorry, goodbye. Or maybe they'll try a little, and so, some organizations are better at that. They do want you to do better, and they have plans to help people out. But more than not, they're just looking to, obviously make profit. And if you don't fit into their bottom line, and even a short term kind of aspect, then you're gone. And we see that with layoffs and furloughs and things like that in a more, cultural way, especially right now during the pandemic. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think if there's a theme, I think that's maybe one wet thing to hang your hat on is that there's an operating vision for employment, and now there's an opportunity to change that, and those who've actually had the vision to make the ability to make that, to demonstrate new operating vision, they've done well for themselves, and they've done well for people connected to them, and they've done well for society as well. So, Henry Ford of the Ford Motor Company, on a personal level, he was problematic on a number of levels, as we all know. But in terms of anti-Semitism, the Nazi, but in terms of coming up with the new way of doing cars on the assembly line, yes, it did destroy the craftsmanship of those making cars. But when the way his wheels turns in his head, it's the jobs have been transformed, they've been changed, but hey, I'm going to pay them more. Paying his employees more for, his friend is to sell more cars so that they could buy cars. But the idea is that there's an employment contract, an operating vision of employment, things like what Andrew Yang talked about, that we're trying to get from here to there.
Right.
So and what we saw with this pandemic that was so surprising is that all of a sudden the safe distancing that was caused by us reacting to the pandemic out of control, all of a sudden, a lot of changes like Andrew Yang talked about that we're probably going to, in the next 10, 20 years, all of a sudden they're happening right now.
Right.
You're a restaurant, you have to figure out how to not be a dine-in restaurant like overnight, And universities, I've been dabbling with remote learning. Now it's like, nope, you're going to start learning remote learning and all the issues with that right now. And so now is really the time where people are asking the questions. And so one thing, because we've talked about, the American Jobs Factory, one of the things that maybe one area of need that I see out there is we need someone to advocate for this, that this is happening, because when the pandemic first happened, like in big and everything was shutting down, remember they were giving emergency, like Amazon, other companies were like frontline workers are getting more pay.
Yeah.
Why couldn't that have been a more permanent thing?
Right.
The same job, you're working in CVS or something. No, this is not just temporary. From now on, you're getting 25% more. And then we could use that to sort of say, well, how could this role be like different? Like,
right.
let's use this as an opportunity to reimagine what this particular job could be or should be. So I think this is a time for reimagining. And I think there is a danger because transformation is one of those crazy things organizationally. It never happens until it does.
Right.
And it may never happen. So we have an election coming. It's an opportunity almost to have a revolution in miniature. And so regardless of whether Trump or Biden wins, we will have an opportunity as a people in the United States, Americans, to reimagine and make this world what we need it to be, or we that it be. And that's the thing. And if I'm just going to blur the differences just to make the point. Regardless of whether it's Trump or Biden, we all have work to do.
Right.
We have work to do to create the world that we say that we want. And the way to not do it is to just sort of be at the sidelines. There's a member of Yang Gang who, I just tried not to be too hard, but it was like out of I think their frustration, they're thinking they're not going to vote.
Right.
That was like a strategy. It's like, that's not a strategy. That's actually surrender. And so I think there needs to be like a place. And so American Jobs Factory, you guys can do that. Like kind of find your place and position that's relative to your background, skills, and your passion, and like pick that one piece and be like, or set of pieces and be like, yeah, I'm going to be the champion right here.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely the dream, the vision. And I think, it is important to do, talk to your network and keep putting your vision out there so more people know about it, and, fundraise, definitely. But I find in organizations, one of the things that I'm solving is there's always like secret information like the employees aren't allowed to have. And, Dan Price kind of talked about how he took a different approach, especially with the pandemic. And he, talked to his employees about how, because of the difficulties, they would need to do something else. And then when he clearly communicated the problems, everyone got together and just decided who would voluntarily take a pay cut to keep the business, going. And I find when there's not secret information in an organization, if the problems are clearly laid out and everybody is given the chance to come together and solve them, then the organization does much better than when you're trying, like, this employee is not allowed to to know this, that might upset them, or these employees can't know this because that would cause an issue. When that kind of environment happens, there's so much distrust, and the organization ultimately, I feel, crumbles. And what do you think about that kind of observation?
I mean, it helps to have a problem solving or solutions orientation to things. So it's kind of like, it's almost like saying, and because that's the thing, I think people are able to work together even spontaneously to reinvent things when you come back to what is the problem. So it might be like, with all the unemployment in this town in Ohio, we have this many more families that don't have food. All right. So then they need to eat. And what are the characteristics of those families? Like, where do they live? Are they mostly single people? What are their ages? How many of them are children? And what kinds of food can we get to them? And, and some of it, if it's refrigerated, like, do they have refrigerators? And it's like, so I think having a problem solving orientation is important. And I do think, operating vision based on the world as it is, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's isn't it crazy? The smartphone has only been around for about 15 years. Is that? Yeah. I mean, wow. There are whole businesses now built off of the smartphone. So on one hand, that's amazing. You can create a business or a set of activities that's built off of an app. Wow. On one hand, that's the great side. But the other side is there are people like my mother who will never understand how to use an app, know? And so, but that might be an opportunity as well. I mean, there's actually this company called Go Grandparent. It's like my mother discovered it, and it's like, and what is this? And it turns out what they do is, if you don't know how to use an app, how do you call Uber or Lyft if you don't know how to use an app? You do. You go to Go Grandparent. So there's a place where you call the number out. And so basically you press the 1 saying, I'm coming from home, or, and then I think 2 is like, hey, I want to return home or something. But basically someone comes on the line and they tell you, okay, what address, where do you want to go? And they call an Uber or Lyft for you.
Wow. Well, there's tons of problems to solve, but I think I was trying to, talk specifically within an organization. Like, for instance, traditionally you're not allowed to know what somebody else is being paid, hourly in an organization. That's just an example. You can't find out, what your managers are making a year. You can't find out, a lot of times you can't find out what you would need to do to be able to make, a higher amount of money. And there's all that secret information a lot of times within an organization that doesn't allow you to move forward, because you just don't know, because you're not privy to know those type of things. Or how much is your department making a month? A lot of times that's not even known. And I think, that's one of the things. I think if that knowledge is given in an organization, then people would collectively get together to say, hey, what can I do to make my department more money a month? So maybe that would mean that I could get a higher paycheck if my department made more money a month. But a lot of times that's like, oh no, you're not allowed to know that because you're just an employee. And I think, the future is open source, open information, even within an organization.
Yeah, I think part of the opportunity and the challenge is really, you're talking about transparency.
Right.
And the issue and the challenge, though, is we want transparency not only for accountability purposes. That's usually why we talk about it. Oh, someone's going to cheat, so it has to be transparent. I mean, so there's an argument for that, but there is an argument for saying that being more transparent enables us all to work together and help each other solve problems. So regardless of the accountability part, just from a, it's like, if we know, let's say, how many children don't have computers to do remote learning, it's more easy for someone to be able to come in and be able to either offer something, in order, or work with others to be able to do it.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really difficult. I mean, that's probably my biggest concern. One of my biggest concerns about this current presidential administration is that they don't value transparency.
Right.
They cover things up, and
It's like the old school days, you know.
Yeah, it's like 1950s organization, but it's 2000. It's like, no, we cannot afford to do that. Or
yeah, and everybody was thinking Trump was transparent because he tweets more than any other president, and they're like, oh, well, we have an inside scoop on what's going on because he tweets, but then he hides everything in the background. So
yeah, I feel like maybe giving this an example of what the challenge is organizationally. When President Trump was saying that he wanted schools to be open, there were a couple of problems with that. One is it's not really a president's business to dictate at that level. So many school districts are different. If he was saying all the schools should be in person or all the schools should be remote, either one, that coming from a president is wrong-headed thinking.
Right. But he has opinion about everything.
Yeah, the idea of some central authority knowing what should be done for all of us. And
but at the same time, he didn't have a national response. He was like, "Oh, the states decide,"
Well, that was the second part of it. If he is going to the extent that the authority has an opinion, there should be support for it. So, in other words, if he's going to say that all the schools should be in person, where's the money? Where's the plan for people to do it? Because no matter which road a school chooses, it's going to be hard. Either way, in that sense, there's no good solutions here. Having all the kids being remote and all of them being in school, each one has its own problems and solutions thinking that we need, and we need to parse out. It's like, well, maybe we can do remote learning for the high school students, and maybe how can we do something for the elementary school, and what are the conditions under that works? Maybe we need to invest more in studying what's going on in terms of transmission so that we can know what's safe in doing it in person. So in the way it was like he kind of represents the worst of both worlds. It's like he thinks he claims to be the authority of everything, that things are too complex that no one can ever know. And then he doesn't follow up with any real smart
action steps.
Yeah, there's no smart action steps behind what he's doing either. And so in that sense, it's like, in a way, he is kind of he's unfit for this job. He's really unfit for this job. Regardless of what do you think he should do, I mean, I think he's not really fit for the job.
Well, I think you're on the same page of most Americans, hopefully with his election. I definitely, I mean, I'm hoping for, Joe Biden to win so we can have a transformation. I think just people are, just exhausted by Trump. It's like he's just exhausted the American people on large. But what is your professional advice, I guess, when an organization is growing from big to small? I mean, it is hard to organize people and get them on the same page. And I was listening to Elon Musk, and he was saying that it's important to set up incentives that are positive towards people being creative and providing progressive solutions to our organization. And he said carrot and stick, and then the stick would be people who are not growing or providing value, decentives towards them. And so, I mean, he's a very engineer, technical kind of guy. And Gary Vaynerchuk is completely opposite as far as that goes, because he's always like people first, hire fast, and then hire slow, and fire fast is one of his things. But what kind of advice do you have for growing organizations?
I want to say neither of those two are the most important. The most important thing is the story, the narrative. Why are you here? Why are we here together? Like,
so
why?
more of a Simon Sinek type of.
Yes, very much so.
Have your why.
What is your why? It's like, why? What is the purpose? What is the cause? Like, why do we have this cause? And why am I participating in it? And let's discuss why you might be interested in it. I think that is like the key. That's the thing. The why question is really the most important one. And then there's going to be a secondary question. I think it's is really to own the constraints, including the time dependence. So I think any organization now any organization, big or small, for-profit or nonprofit, here is my tip for you.
Okay, there we go.
We are about to have an election. What's going to be more critical is not, I mean, that's critical what happens in that election, in the voting, but it's what happens afterwards. So between November 3rd and the new Congress that gets sworn in early January and the new president, it's going to be the wildest ride of this country that we've experienced in a very long time. It's likely to. It might not, because I think a lot of people are concerned about all the craziness that could happen. And so where there's all this mitigation, and who knows, it'll be like that. I'm not sure if you were your age, but there was this thing when the year 2000 came, the Y2K problem.
Yeah.
Everyone was concerned about that, right? Well, because we were all worried about it, we were able to, it wasn't as big of a deal. Right. And that's kind of what's going on. We're going to have crazy issues about how the Electoral College really works, and how the, succession, succession about, like, if something, the president does appear to have a very serious illness, and there is no one's voicing it out of fear, but there's a chance he may not make it to the election. There's I mean, it's not trivial,
Yeah.
And so basically we're going to have all of that. But the thing is, I mean, that's the kind of, to give an example of how this can be mitigated is, I was at one of Andrew Yang's fundraisers, in maybe April 2019. And one of the things he said was that the DNC was convinced that the convention the next year in 2020 was going to be brokered. There were too many candidates, no one was going to get enough. So he was like, yeah, the DNC's thinking this. And that caught my attention because I was talking to someone else, completely independent of Yang World, who has connected with DNC, who was saying the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
that didn't happen, but yeah.
The thing is, it didn't happen. And the thing is, in some ways, I think the fear of of that happening is something that probably Biden used after he won, South Carolina. It's like, hey, we don't want this to happen, Right. And so
there's always the prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I think that's what we're always trying to do.
Yeah, but I think the part that I think there's a temptation in us to not want to be uncomfortable or look into the uncomfortable, and it's like, and so because of that, sometimes it's easy to gravitate to what we hope or what we fear, or to avoid the conversation whatsoever. But really, it is pretty clear if you look in terms of from different sources at this time, Biden is going to win, and he's going to win decisively. However, this is very different than the Hillary Clinton scenario, because what's really kind of wild is she never was above 50% in any of the polls at the state level or the federal level, state level or national. She was always, she was leading by 2%, but she was also had lots of unfavorables like Trump. And then 6% of the people voting nationally voted for third party. So you get 6% not voting, and you have the last minute people swinging to Trump, and then somehow you get Trump winning. He won with, I think, 46% of the national vote, which is interesting because Romney had 47% of the vote in 2012, and he lost.
Right.
So if you really dig into the numbers enough, the transparency of the numbers, this is a different situation.
So I think the fear is that there's a sense that Trump can always pull a rabbit out of his hat at the last minute. that nobody is prepared for or can see coming. And it's like, oh, I have this, and then that sways a whole swatch of the public to vote for him. And he's just such a wild card. We just have this thing like he can come from 21 points down in the fourth quarter and throw a Hail Mary, and somebody's going to catch it and get a touchdown. It's just.
Well, that's part of it. He really did. He didn't really do that in 2016 either, but people think that he did. And I think, yeah. And it's almost like, I mean, it does make a difference if, if you have access to hacked information from about what the DNC was going to do in Pennsylvania. And then you have Hillary play along, a Clinton campaign play along by not campaigning in Wisconsin. And then you play the math right. So I mean, I think that's the scary thing. I mean, it's like, it's most likely that Biden's going to win. But it's actually, if Trump is going to win, it's going to be because some other thing, some crazy thing that we didn't see before our eyes has been going on.
Yeah, well, I think that's the fear. But I just think, like I said, people are exhausted from Trump at this point. And so, anything is better at this point, and Biden does come in to the mix going, I'm better than Trump just by default. He was kind of better from all the Democrats, kind of just by default, kind of because I feel like a part of it was nobody can make a clear decision. So it's like, well, hey, pick me. I have the experience and the clout. So kind of like, okay, well, we have to make a decision. So you win.
Well, one thing I think that's going to happen is, I think I saw it as a meme. I hope I get this right. Okay, so Trump announces that he has, coronavirus, and there is all sorts of evidence to say that he did.
Right.
But I
don't think it's a conspiracy that he got coronavirus.
Well, there's a conspiracy. People don't believe it because I think they haven't seen the information. But basically, the meme goes something like, that day, like the second or something, the first, that was the day that liberals started believing in God and conservatives started believing in science.
That's a good meme.
Yeah, and I think that describes, in a nutshell, I think the phase that we are entering into the rest of this month, November, December, and into January, that there are a lot of things. We're interconnected enough as a society that things can turn over very quickly. I mean, and I know because I lived through it. It's like that project in New Orleans, like when I was worked with volunteers to map something in 4.5 days that I thought would take 2.5 weeks.
Right.
If you had come to me 2 months before, like 2.5 months before, like around this time, and you said, hey, Quintus, 3 months from now, not only are you going to knock out that one neighborhood you're all concerned about, but you're going to knock out, and with volunteers, all 22 neighborhoods. It's all going to happen by early January.
Yeah.
I would have said, no way. It's like, man, I don't have a plan. I don't have the money. I don't have the people. I'm going through a divorce and I have no idea what my job is going to be. I'm not even going to listen to you because that ain't going to happen.
Yeah. There's a lot to say for just having intention to do something. Yeah, a lot of things come together.
Being in action. So in that sense, I think for you, that's the thing. It's like the question to have is engage what your why is, start talking with other people to help flesh it out, but then say to yourself, where are you going to be in action in the operating future? Like, where are you going to be in action this month, November and December, given the other things that are happening in our society? Just focus on that, because then once you focus on that, and you have your why, you have your what. If you have your why and you have your what, like how tends to figure itself out. I found.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking this out with me. Is there any last thoughts or anything that you want to share before we take off?
I think I just think everyone, again, these are very unusual times. And we will be uncomfortable, but it will be okay. And just reach out to people that you love, and to the extent that you can, find your peace, and just trust. If we march through the uncomfortable thing together, that there really is something wonderful on the other side.
Awesome. Is there any way that you want people to connect to you?
Well, I have an Instagram that I probably should use more.
Okay. Instagram.
Quintus Jett. That's my name. Yes, Quintus Jett.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Well, feel free to stay on. I'll talk to you after, but we're going to close out the show. So thank you again for coming on, and thank you everyone for joining me today. And we will have more interviews in the future, more great guests. Thank you for joining me. We want to create jobs for the future that don't destroy us. And everyone, take care. Have a great night.